welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Hi, and welcome to Earth Feels. This is Christine, your co-host. And today, Rose and I are going to be continuing our conversation with Harriet Sugarman, founder of Climate Mama. Harriet is a U.S.-based university professor, author, writer, sought-after speaker, and a climate policy advisor with many years of experience when it comes to activism on our climate emergency. She is the face and founder behind Climate Mama, one of the first organizations and information sources dedicated to educating parents about the realities of the climate crisis. So welcome back, Harriet. Let's jump right in.
So I'd love to switch the conversation to hope. And I was really taken by the two different kinds of hope that you talked about. Would you address that a little bit? I think hope is such an important topic for where we are right now, because the door is not closed yet. Scientists are still telling us the door is open. And how do we take this grief, this angst, as you say in the title of your book, angst, and make it into action? And I think hope is integral in that.
I 100% agree with you, Rose. And actually, there's a quote from Barbara Kingsolver, who's an author, who talks about hope as a renewable resource and that we can renew it each morning and each day. To paraphrase, that's not her exact quote, but yes, I think that when we talk about the 5 stages of grief, that following that comes resolve and hope. And hope, in the book, I speak about it because hope by itself, we need to move it forward. So Joanna Macy talks about active hope and how do we use our actions to build that hope in an active way, or also intrinsic hope, which I think is more of a metaphysical way of addressing hope, and one that I've heard in ways that through your show too, is understanding and trusting in that things are going to evolve and move forward, and that even in the depth of some of that grief that we can build hope because we are moving forward as a species, as a planet, and we're building that hope as well too. So I think that is the central part of my book, is giving our children, helping them build their hope, and showing them in the ways that we talk to them about ways to build up that hope. And that's through the actions that we do, and to show them all the many people working on the climate crisis from so many different angles, whether as an artist to share their work to document what's happening, or to help us visualize what we want to see happen in the future, to the scientists that are working on it, to the teachers that are teaching it, to the young people that are leading it. So how do we create hope in a situation that seems so dire and sometimes way too big to get our arms around? We have to find ways that we can find that in ourselves, so that then we can help our children manifest their own hope and belief that the future and the now can be more positive, and actually they can then build hope for others as well.
So have you found that that's your experience, that your hope comes from the actions that you're taking to create the future that you want for your kids?
Yes, I think that is absolutely, you talked about how 10 years later, why am I still going forward? And it is because I see so many more people coming into not just the climate movement, but working on it from all different angles and sides. And that with so many people, this conscious energy all around the world working towards ways to draw down, to remove the carbon from the air and move us forward in a more sustainable way. And even, from Kate Raworth, who's an economist who talks about donut economics and planetary boundaries that we've pushed out, but recognizing there are boundaries. And so there's so many different ways to see all the people that are part of the conversation that has all these different parts, that I feel truly hopeful. And in a way, and I talk about this in the book too, just with youth voices and young people stepping in as well in a very forward way, that I feel more hopeful than even as things, as we talked about with CO2 levels rising to places they've never been before, with our planet telling us she is sick, and we know, right, that, and you talk about this all the time, right? The planet is going to survive. She's not going away.
Right.
As you mentioned, we see in the boreal forest, in the equatorial forest, wherever, we're changing. Our species are at risk, ours too. And we've put us into the sixth mass extinction. We, as a singular species, are so powerful, which is incredible and daunting and, disturbing, but yet there are so many people more awake to that and digging in to do things. So that builds my hope and gives me hope.
Well, and I thought you touched on it in your book in more than one place, this idea of so I just want to talk about individual responsibility and action and collective, because you, at one point in the book, you say, so the message has been, and interestingly, it was with climate reality too. Here's what you can do: change light bulbs, take individual, very small actions, which doesn't really address the enormity of the crisis, but yet we all know that we are only responsible for ourselves, and that we can only take individual action to inspire others, hopefully, to join us, like you've done in your Climate Mama website. But talk about that tension between individual responsibility and action, and the collective change that's needed. Yeah,
it's such a good and important thing to discuss, I think, because we ultimately can only be responsible for ourselves, and yet the climate crisis is such a huge problem impacting the whole planet, and we are already pushing our planet to the limit. She's trying to stay in balance and she can't. That we need huge collective actions if we are going to slow down things in enough time for our species to survive, not only survive, but to thrive. And so I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I wrote about it in the book, and I wrote about, I think what you're talking about there, Christine, is that I think society and corporations actually have tried to put the onus on us as individuals. We need to, there was a Keep America Beautiful campaign that started the recycling program, and campaigns run by big corporations that produce single-use items that they weren't cleaning up, that they were selling to make really cheap, and then saying, okay, well, yes, get the enjoyment of this hydrated, get hydrated from this beverage in this plastic bottle, and you make sure you recycle it, but we're going to sell it to you really cheap so that we don't have to account for the cleanup to it. So there's a lot of being put, and that we see that with oil and gas and our use of energy, that the onus comes on us, and yet the product itself that we're using, who's making it, etc. There's lots that can be done there. But I've been thinking lately, because we've seen with COVID-19, right, that this has impacted, and in those similar ways, the individual actions that we've taken collectively are helping our immediate, our towns, our cities, the world, right? So we are powerful as individuals. Oh my gosh, we're seeing that we are so powerful, and we're seeing that, we're doing things, but then we're sewing masks with our community, we're feeding our frontline workers, and we're coming together to do those things. So it's been especially, frustrating. And again, climate shouldn't be political. It has become a partisan issue, but it can't be political, because we all have to be digging in on it. But even if we can't come to agreement, or we see inaction at the federal level, certainly in the US on climate, collectively what we're doing at the community level, and then multiply that, right? Or we used to say, right, when we first were doing these things, Christine, with changing the light bulb, well, we know that's not enough. And are we going to get 1 million people to change their light bulbs? Maybe not, and we can't wait for that. But individually, we can all vote. There are things that we can do that actually make an individual difference. And then, as you said, showing what we do can inspire others. And some of us, we just can take these steps. But some people can take giant leaps because they're in positions that they can do that. Or who knows who you inspire through your individual action that is that person that then invents something that actually draws down all the carbon from the atmosphere because they heard your radio show, or your podcast, or we don't know that, and we may never know. So I think we can't give up and say, well, I can't do anything.
Well, I think that goes directly to what you said about the superpowers, and I love that, because power of the purse is my superpower. I mean,
well, you're both economists, that's why.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been boycotting certain companies for a long time, and my list gets longer and longer because my resources are limited, and I'm going to make my dollars count. But power of the voice, through writing a book like you, through Climate Mama, through doing a podcast, we all need to be talking. And then the power of voting. It should not be a partisan issue. It is being, in the States here, it is being really touted as that. But we all need to vote for representatives of either party that are working towards not even necessarily sustainable, but regenerative policies to keep us safe, to keep our future intact. So I loved that part about, I can see, little capes on all of us.
I've pulled out a cape when I was addressing our Citizens Climate Lobby conference in 2016. So yeah, it's exactly right. I love what you drew out of the COVID-19, that connection. And Rose and I have been talking a lot about that in the last couple of months, what we can learn from it. And I think too that you say climate change shouldn't be a political issue. Well, COVID-19 seems to have become a political issue. So apparently any kind of issue that requires change at some level that challenges people in their daily activities and their beliefs, whatever it is, can become political. So I guess we'll just have to say that's just what we're dealing with. And it's not just in the US. I don't know how closely you're following Canadian politics, but sadly, it is not just in the US that it's a political issue.
Anyway. So where do you go from here, Harriet? This book launch must be big. You're probably getting a lot of speaking engagements and a lot of podcasts and radio interviews and stuff. And then where do you go from here?
Yeah, it's something I'm thinking a lot about, Rose, and pondering how, and I think we all do that, right? And we're talking about that. Where can I use my knowledge, my skills, my voice now that I have this voice?
Now. Yeah,
in the biggest and most powerful way. And I think that for me, as a Canadian and American, but living in the US now in 2020, for the next, until November, I want to find a way to dig in on these 2020 elections. And I'm not sure, does that mean it's at the state level? Is it in a different state maybe? Is it nationally? But as Christine said, it isn't about what party you're with. Every party, whoever you are, and you need to have a plan. And as you said, a regenerative way, we need to have an understanding that whoever gets our vote, and they need to earn it and have not only a plan, but a way to be working towards solving this great challenge that we face, because the climate crisis is the greatest challenge that we will face in our lifetime period. And we need to see how it's all connected, that it's not just by itself. Every issue comes together. The idea of a Green New Deal, however you decide to define that, but making sure that we look at it from a justice perspective, from bringing people all over back to work, from rebuilding. How do we take this COVID-19, because we will come out of it in that time period between now and November? How is it that plans for people that want to get elected actually need to do it in a sustainable way that does it with the climate crisis in mind? And so I am going to figure that out, and I'd love your ideas and input. Send them to me, call me.
Okay.
But how can we use our platforms that we have to help people understand how important that is? And be it to supporting, for me, it will be on making sure people actually use their votes. They vote, they register to vote, they get everybody to vote, and they support candidates that understand the realities of the crisis, that it's not divorced from COVID-19. However we recover from that, as we rebuild, as we put people back to work, it all has to be put together. But those bigger questions and ways to use the power of the purse, to use supporting companies that are also going to need our support, well, they need to be thinking and acting in a way that is sustainable, and that still can't be lost in the push to come back. It all has to be how we come back. I think we are, as I hear different people talking about it in different words. This is the great turning, the green pivot. We are at this really, we're alive at this time that I think we've all thought about. How is it going to happen? When's it going to come? I think it's right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think any of us thought about a global pandemic, but if that's, what it takes, and it is still so wide open, it could go any way, but it has provided an opening that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Well, it's provided almost a practice session here. It's kind of how I feel it. It's like we're getting to see what our future holds, and this may end, and we're hoping that it does, but it's not the last of these kinds of things as we're working against Mother Nature. So it's really interesting times.
it is.
What other things that came in for me when you were talking about your work going forward and getting the vote out is young people really don't vote. And so, maybe that's somehow you're working towards getting parents to talk to their kids about the importance of voting. I don't know if that's anything. That just kind of occurred to me.
Yeah, no, I think that is a way in too, right? Or grandparents asking their grandchildren to vote for them too, or as our newly minted voters, those 18-year-olds or young people coming in, or I've had these conversations with another climate reality colleague, a dear friend, Jill McIntyre-Witt in Washington State, who talks about love letters from young people to other young people saying, I can't vote for me, for,
nice.
So I think there's different ways to activate young people who feel discouraged about our democracy, right? I think that, that is one of the things that I talk about in the book too, because people press me all the time, tell me, what are those 3 things that I can do, because I have no time and I can't do anything. I can do only so much. And because really, I personally believe there's as many ways forward as there are as many of us on the planet, that because the situation is so dire that wherever our passions lead us, that's what we should look at it through a lens of climate and figure out that way forward. But one of those 3 things, I guess, is just caring for and minding our democratic process, right? We are seeing, especially in the US, but in many countries around the world, it's really fragile. It's actually brittle. It's become brittle in this country, and it could break. Who would have thought?
I think it is broken. Isn't that?
Yeah. Well, in many ways, it is broken. Yeah, you're right. And people have fought for centuries for us to have the right to be able to cast our vote, and that too is being threatened in this time of COVID. Can we do? How do we vote? So I think just all being focused and aware of that is something important for, and especially for young, those 25 and under that have chosen to step out of our, democracy. So if we're going to complain about it and be frustrated with it or disgusted with it, we should be part of it.
Mhm.
And that's, voting, running for office, getting to know our candidates, following up with our candidates, or our elected officials once they're no longer our candidates. So being more participatory in our democracy than maybe, and making it more accessible.
I wonder if you think that Greta Thunberg's influence will help get American young people out to vote. I don't know. Does she specifically address voting? Has she?
Well, you know what, I think, and she's one of those figures that truly, she will have her place in the history of humans, right? As this seer of, or speaker of truth, and how her voice has been heard by young people. And if it's not her, it's many of those other people young people that she has awakened, or that were awake before, but now we're paying more attention to them. So, in the US, there's these organizations run by youth, Zero Hour, or the Climate Strikes, or the ones that she's been part of, or
yeah.
Sunrise, right?
Mm-hmm.
With more, those college age, or those 20-something kids that are really smart and working to change policy. I think that is definitely opened many young people to their opportunities to impact policy and legislative issues. So I think it's there, but the actual voting, maybe not.
Yeah.
We need to work on that.
Well, and it was interesting, in quotation marks, to read in your book that under Obama was the biggest increase in oil and gas exploration in the US ever.
Yeah, that was pretty icky feeling.
Yeah. So we have to really hold politicians, whatever country, their feet to the fire, and recognize here in Canada, in the US, wherever you are, that there are oil and gas lobbyists meeting with politicians. I think if you look here in Canada, they have to keep track. It's 2,000 meetings a year with when I think of trying to influence one member of parliament, like that's more than once a day. So we need to be lobbying on behalf of our children and our planet. And I think that your book is a really good place for parents who are feeling disempowered and hopeless to start to pick it up. It's very practical. It's well grounded in climate science, and I'm really, really happy that you put it all down so succinctly.
And thank you for just writing a book that feeds my soul. Gives me lots to chew on.
Thank you both too. It's been such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
You're welcome.
Lovely.
So what is the good news for today?
Well, the good news today, I think, is incredibly good news. Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans, the YouTube video that we talked about several weeks ago, was removed from YouTube.
Wow.
And, a man with the name of Toby Smith, Wahoo Toby Smith, if you're listening, he shut it down because there's a 4-second clip of his footage contained in the film. And it was seconds that he used from his, I'm going to quote, his rare earthenwork project, detailing the journey of rare earth materials from Inner Mongolia. And he was watching the film and very disturbed. Toby has worked, or Mr. Smith has worked with environmental projects for a number of years, and he was very disturbed by what was being presented. And then he saw his own clip being used without his permission. So he went, he didn't go to the filmmakers. He went directly to YouTube and said, this is copyright infringement. And copyright law says, he has the right to do that. They never asked his permission to use it. So he has shut it down for over 4 seconds. So just incredible news, because the filmmakers, Michael Moore and Jeff Gibbs, they're saying their response is that they're working with YouTube. Well, I think they're going to have to take the film down and edit out what his portion is. I haven't gone back to see what it is. I don't know that my heart can take watching that movie one more time, but yeah, it's shut down. Not before 8 million people got to see it, but it's nice to know that someone who has the integrity to step into the foray and for this film that was pure propaganda. So
Yeah, that certainly didn't present the whole picture. So I agree. That is good news.
yeah.
And for our action and sanity tip, we have been talking about, obviously this podcast is about climate change, but we've also been talking about the COVID-19 pandemic that has shut down the globe and is getting into an interesting stage across the world, but particularly in the US, where things are opening up, but the numbers of people infected are also still going up. And the public health officer in British Columbia here in Canada, the provincial public health officer, Bonnie Henry, had 3 phrases that she has been repeating ever since the pandemic started. And BC was one of the first provinces to have cases. And at almost every press conference, she will remind British Columbians to be kind, be calm, and be safe. And in that sort of spirit, I was sharing with Rose that I'm reading a book called The Gentle Art of Blessing, a simple practice that will transform you and your world. It's by Pierre Prater-Vand, and we can put up a link to his book. But in the beginning of his book, he talks about being disturbed when he was working in Algeria. He's French, a French national. He was working as a sociologist in Algeria after the revolution in the mid-60s, and came upon a story where he heard that about somebody who had been tortured in a police station, exactly where the person who was torturing him had himself been tortured by the former regime. And he writes, yes, the material structures of the administration, economy, and legal system had been overturned, but the torturer's behavior showed me that the hearts of those who ran the country had apparently not changed in the same measure. To effect true change, I realized there must be a transformation from within. And on that line, even though it's tempting to respond in kind to people you don't agree with, to people who are flaunting the rules, maybe. I know that's true for Rose and I. Maybe you're one of those people that's flaunting the rules and you don't feel kindly towards people who are trying to follow them. But whatever side you're on, I think the idea that Dr. Henry suggests, be kind, be calm, and be safe. And specifically in line with this book, being kind means instead of returning that idea eye for an eye, to get biblical on us today, but actually return irritation or anger or resentment that's directed at you with kindness, deliberately choosing not to respond in kind. That might be the beginning of the true transformation within. That is what we need right now. So
yeah, we need to de-escalate.
Yeah.
No, I know for me, I almost have a knee-jerk reaction that I just want to be like, but take a deep breath. Be calm, stay calm, step into your center, stay calm. When they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama.
So we'll actually put maybe a Buddhist blessing or maybe a blessing out of this book. We'll put some blessing, a simple blessing that you can sort of take to heart and use if you need, or make up your own. So I think that wraps it up for today. It was great to have Harriet here for 2 parts.
Yeah. We appreciate her wisdom and her hard work for all of our kids.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye. Catch you next time. That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for